Revealed, Millionaire mocks Waitress, but her 9 languages turn the tables in an incredible way. On a bustling Friday evening at Denny's, Sarah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders as she navigated between tables. The aroma of coffee mingled with the clatter of plates, masking the tumult within her. Each time she delivered a steaming plate of pancakes or refilled another cup, her thoughts flickered to Emily, her bright-eyed 6-year-old daughter waiting at home. How could she possibly provide the life Emily deserved while serving the same faces and mundane dishes day in and day out? Just as Sarah was lost in her thoughts dreaming of a life where she could share different cultures through language, he walked in. Mark, the local millionaire, with a disdainful smirk plastered on his face. The tailored suit hinted at wealth and privilege, and the crinkle of his nose screamed superiority as he scoffed at the menu prices. Sarah could feel her heart race, the familiar dread washing over her. He looked at her like she was a lesser being. "It's not like you have anything better to do than serve the likes of us," he bandied dismissively. With each word, every breath seemed to hitch in her throat, agony lacing the air. "Never let anyone make you feel small," her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, a lifeline she clung to desperately. But what could she do against the tide of condescension? Her hands trembled slightly as she poured Mark's coffee, the pressure mounting both from the surging crowd and from the judgment emanating from him. With every shift, she felt the burden of unfulfilled dreams. Late nights hunched over her laptop, practicing French, Spanish, and even Mandarin swirled in her thoughts. She longed to travel, to teach Emily about the world's vastness and wonder. Just a moment of recognition, of validation, would go a long way, but here was Mark, his wealthy friends laughing at the diner's rustic charm, and she was just a cog in their wheel. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she scrubbed the counter later, the upcoming multicultural night at the cafe suddenly caught her attention. A wave of possibility crashed over her. She was eager to share her language skills, to honor the lessons her grandmother instilled. But the anxiety clawed back. What if she bombed? What if nobody cared? The night of the event arrived, and with it, her heart raced with anticipation. As Sarah grasped the microphone, her fingers trembled, and doubt loomed large. Could she really impress an audience that included Mark? The very man who had treated her like a mere servant. There was a sense of desperation to prove herself, not just for him, but for her daughter who viewed her as a hero. The weight of her dreams pressed down on her, swirling emotions threatening to engulf her. What if she failed? What if the crowd laughed not in applause, but at her expense? And as she took a deep breath, ready to bow out before stepping forward, she could sense Mark's eyes piercing through her, a challenge hanging in the air between them. The tension crackled, leaving her standing at a precipice, teetering between fear and courage, wrestling with her worth. In this moment, her fate intertwined with Mark's indifference, each breath echoing like the ticking clock, driving her toward an inevitable confrontation that could alter everything. The microphone felt colder than she expected, an unforgiving contrast to the warmth of her dreams. Sarah took one last glance at Mark, still lounging with a mocking grin, and something inside her began to shift. Those memories of late nights with textbooks illuminated by the stark glow of her laptop flooded her being, igniting a spark of resolve. Drawing a deep breath, she opened her mouth, her heart pounding as words rushed out, almost drowning her doubts. "Good evening, everyone." Sarah's voice, though initially shaky, firmed as it echoed in the cafe. "I am so excited to share with you tonight the beauty of languages and the cultures behind them." The timbre of her voice surprised her, each syllable carving away at the fortress of fear that had held her captive. As she began recounting her journey, how she learned her first language from her grandmother while gazing at the stars from their porch, Sarah felt the anticipation ripple through the audience. With each translated word, she painted vibrant images of places she had yet to visit but yearned for deeply: bustling markets in Marrakesh, serene temples in Kyoto, and cozy cafes in Paris. Mark's expression shifted slightly, curiosity briefly flickering behind his condescension. The world around her faded into the background, and she only piqued the listener's interest with anecdotes infused with laughter and exuberance. As she transitioned from language to language, her passion radiated through her, pulling even the skeptics toward her light. Yet, with every glance she stole at Mark, it felt as though she were reaching for validation not from the crowd, but from him. But the more she embraced her narrative, the more Sarah acknowledged her own worth. "It's not just about the languages," she declared, voice rising, "it's about connecting with people, understanding their stories. Each time I learn a language, it's like building a bridge to another world." Her heart raced with exhilaration as she sensed the audience's rapport. They were leaning in, hanging on to her every word, and for the first time, she felt significant. Mark's smirk faltered, replaced by a slate of contemplation that unnerved her, his skepticism fading amidst the new light she was casting. The doubts that had clouded her mind in the past began to dissipate, revealing a previously unimagined clarity. She was not simply a waitress anymore, but a storyteller, a cultural ambassador delivering experiences beyond the walls that confined her. As she neared the end of her presentation, the applause surged, swelling like a tangible wave of appreciation stretching out to her. Yet amid the rising swell, Sarah felt a tension within herself, a growing determination to challenge not just Mark, but the entire narrative she had been told, that she was no more than a cog in someone else's machine. "Thank you all for joining me tonight," she finished, standing firm, electric energy coursing through her veins. "Remember, language is just the key, the heart is what opens the door." And as the audience erupted into applause, Sarah caught Mark's eyes once more. This time, they were wide with surprise, acknowledgement seeping through his facade. It felt like a battle fought and won, though the war was far from over. As the evening wound down, adrenaline coursed through her, and she realized this moment was merely the beginning. She wanted more. The vision of helping others find their voice through language surged back, bringing forth a thrilling ambition she hadn't fully subscribed to before. But even as resolve surged within her, a palpable uncertainty lingered: would she confront Mark again, challenge him, or slip back into anonymity? That next confrontation beckoned, a swirling storm of unresolved tensions brewing on the horizon. Each heartbeat seemed to whisper that her journey was not yet complete. The thought of stepping beyond the diner, speaking in foreign tongues, teaching others, ignited a fire in her. Standing at the intersection of possibility and fear, Sarah questioned what path she would choose next: to argue against the unjust preconceptions of wealth, or to discover a new life filled with unity in diversity. After the applause faded and the cafe returned to its usual din, Sarah lingered near the edge of the stage, still buzzing from the adrenaline of her performance. The warmth of the audience's approval wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, yet it wasn't enough to drown out the lingering tension that bubbled just beneath the surface. Mark's expression of surprise was a stark reminder that her battle with self-doubt was not yet over, and she felt a weight tethering her to the moment. As she stepped off the makeshift stage, she instinctively sought out Mark again. He stood at the bar, a drink in hand, his previous arrogance muted. Was it defeat she saw there? She had caught a glimpse of vulnerability behind his carefully curated mask, and it both excited and terrified her. This was a pivotal moment. How could she shape it? Unsure but eager to see where this newfound courage could lead, Sarah approached him. Heart pounding, she quipped, "Did I convert you to the beauty of languages, or is that just a look of disbelief?" He turned, slightly startled, then smirked, a hint of his previous bravado flickering back into existence. Yet, there was a newfound respect in his voice. "I hate to admit it, but you made a compelling case. You're more than just a waitress." The compliment hung in the air, heavy and unfamiliar. Sarah had spent years in the shadows, often satisfied with being part of the background, but something had shifted. Her determination surged again. "And you are more than just a wealthy cynic, Mark. We both have stories. We've been told who we are, where we belong." His surprise deepened, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. Touché. I suppose I've been playing a role as well. Sarah leaned into the change, the thrill of confrontation sweeping over her like a tidal wave. This isn't just about your misconceptions, she pressed on. It's about understanding the richness behind our differences. Language is the bridge, yes, but empathy is the key. Their dialogue was electric, each exchange unveiling layers of complexity that she had never considered he possessed. He had always been the wealthy opponent in her story, dismissive and distant. Yet here they stood, two individuals pushing the boundaries of their roles in this society, both searching for connection beyond the barriers that had long isolated them. Yet, as they engaged, doubts flickered like shadows at the edge of her mind. What if their differing worlds were insurmountable? Was she really prepared to fight for something greater? Mark had power, and she had to confront the notion that their realities were rooted in fundamentally different values. Just as she felt herself wavering, she sensed a shift within. What if she could be more than just the caricature he had painted her as? She felt a swell of determination build again, urging her to challenge the status quo. Why do languages matter to you? She asked suddenly, curiosity overpowering her caution. Mark paused, caught off guard. That's not something I've thought about. Perhaps I've deemed them insignificant. Maybe it's time to rethink that, Sarah suggested, emboldened. It seems to me we both have a lot to learn from each other. The words had slipped out like a truth she hadn't realized she felt, and yet they felt liberating. As their conversation deepened, she found herself envisioning pathways beyond her current existence. Each exchange crystallized the possibility of stepping into her own narrative, a teacher, a mentor, a voice that was not just heard, but respected. But as the evening deepened, so too did the realization that confronting their shared past meant grappling with uncomfortable truths, perhaps even the uncomfortable truths of who she truly wanted to become. This newfound ambition could very well fracture her relationship with her friend and even her life as she knew it. Suddenly, she felt the tension in her stomach coil tighter. This was not merely a conversation, it was an incitement to action. The clock on the wall ticked on, reminding her that choices loomed closer than she had anticipated. Could she truly walk this tightrope between their worlds, challenging the narrative that bound them tight while forging a new identity for herself? The challenge to face her own barriers was at hand, and Mark held a pivotal role. Her next line of thought surged with urgency. What lay ahead was unclear, but she needed to seize the momentum before it slipped away. Let us continue this conversation. It might just change our perspectives, she proposed. There was little time to waste, and now was the moment to step boldly into the unknown. The air crackled around them, filled with uncharted possibilities. What truths would unfold as they stepped deeper into one another's worlds? The stage was set for a confrontation not just with Mark but the very essence of their choices. As Sarah stood there, the weight of the moment gripped her. Mark's smirk faded, revealing an inquisitive gaze that screamed for deeper exploration. She had thrown the gauntlet down, now it was time to see if he would pick it up. Where to, then? Mark finally asked, his sardonic tone lightening just enough to hint at genuine curiosity. The cafe had begun to lose its bustle as the crowd thinned, leaving the two of them in a bubble of quiet anticipation. Let us find a place where we can talk, Sarah responded, surprising herself with her assertiveness. The idea of venturing somewhere more intimate was both exhilarating and daunting. They settled at a nearby table, an unassuming spot beneath dim lighting, encased by shelves of forgotten literature. The air tasted different here, tinged with the promise of untold stories. As they crossed the threshold into this new space, Sarah felt the thrill of stepping into the unknown. She was a performer sharing a stage with a partner she had never expected to engage so meaningfully. So, why languages? Mark asked, leaning forward, eager to hear her thoughts as if they were a key to unlock a treasure trove of insight. They're like songs, each telling tales of places and people, Sarah replied, feeling the rhythm of her passions flow through her. Language is not just a means of communication, it's a multitude of worlds contained within sounds and symbols. The ability to bridge them is powerful. It's about connection, embodiment. Almost like magic. His brow furrowed slightly, visibly processing her words. A shift of understanding flickered in his eyes, and that one glimmer ignited something hopeful within her. Perhaps this was her moment, not just to prove him wrong, but to reveal the wonders of her world and, in doing so, reshape her own narrative. Magic? He queried, a note of skepticism still evident, yet tinged with intrigue. Yes, Sarah continued, emboldened. For years, I felt trapped in a life that didn't reflect who I was. Each language I learned was an escape, a doorway into cultures that challenged my own. It helped me see beyond my immediate reality. Mark leaned back, contemplation etching deeper lines across his features. And you think this magic can reshape how we see each other? It has to. Until we understand those outside our experience, we're just echoing our narratives, living scripted lives without any real depth. Mark hesitated, and for a split second, he seemed vulnerable. And what makes you think I'm worth that investment? Aren't I just another wealthy cynic? Because those roles are just pixels in a grander picture, she replied, a new intensity pulsing through her. Your worldview doesn't have to define you if you don't want it to. It takes vulnerability to step outside the comfort of who we think we should be. Conviction surged through her, replacing doubt. This was not merely an educational debate, it was a bid for authenticity, for liberation from the constraints of their respective identities. But Sarah sensed a formidable barrier. Would he risk the facade he had crafted? I don't have a narrative like yours, Sarah, he confessed, almost begrudgingly. I've carved out my life with privilege. That doesn't lend itself to vulnerability. Maybe it's time to break that mold, she challenged softly. The recognition that she was nudging him away from the edge of his carefully curated identity filled her with a fierce determination. The path toward change wasn't linear, it was laden with friction and uncertainty. Yet the prospect of forging a new vision felt intoxicatingly real. As Mark met her gaze, the silence that enveloped them pulsed with possibility. The notion that their worlds could intersect was breathtaking. The uncertainty of where this journey could lead gnawed at her, but she welcomed it. After all, growth could only occur when one decided to leap. The cafe, with its fading chatter, faded into background noise, and for a moment, Sarah forgot everything except the tension that thrummed between them. What would their next conversation reveal? How could they truly connect and challenge the assumptions that bound them? The stage was set for revelations of profound impact, and Sarah was more ready than ever to explore this uncharted territory. But just as she prepared to voice the next question, uncertainty flickered through her mind. Was this truly the beginning of a partnership, or merely an exchange with no destined path? How far was she willing to go, and what sacrifices might await her in the name of understanding? The moment hung heavy, waiting for her to act, to either take a daring step forward or retract into the safety of her previous uncertainty. Would she embrace the risk, or would she retreat into the familiar boundaries of her old life? The answer rested in the unfolding conversation, where every word could either build a connection or reinforce the walls that separated them. As Sarah sat across from Mark, the weight of the moment pressed upon her like a curtain about to rise. A myriad of thoughts flitted through her mind, each one a mixture of wonder and trepidation. This unexpected divergence from her previous routine was intoxicating, yet daunting. She wrestled with the enormity of their conversation, balancing the urge to retreat and the desire to breach the veneer of his privilege that seemed impenetrable. Tell me about a language that changed you, Mark prompted, a hint of sincerity threading through his previous skepticism. Her heart quickened at the open invitation to share her passion. Spanish, she declared without hesitation. It was the first language I truly fell in love with. I was a teenager, desperately seeking the world beyond my suburban confines. When I learned to speak, I suddenly found myself in conversations that felt electric. Music, poetry, these weren't just texts anymore, they were invitations to see life from fresh perspectives. He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Sarah noticed how his demeanor shifted, the lines on his forehead softening as he listened with genuine interest. Discussion was their dance, and she felt herself leading them into deeper waters. Interesting. That sounds liberating, he mused. But I find it hard to believe that even with that kind of passion, you could somehow transform the privilege I've built around my life. Why not? The challenge slipped through her lips, igniting something fierce in her chest. Your privilege can suffocate you if you let it. It's like a gilded cage. Learning about different cultures, embracing other languages, opens gates towards empathy, real empathy. Mark straightened slightly, his curiosity piqued further. So, for you, it's less about the language itself then, more about the doors it opens? Exactly, she replied, arcing towards the heart of her belief. Each word learned is another thread woven into the fabric of understanding. It's an act of rebellion against insular living. She felt exhilarated, her voice had taken on a rhythm, buoyed by her conviction. Rebellion? Mark echoed, a hint of a smile teasing the corners of his mouth. Yes, she continued, emboldened. When you learn a new language, you're challenging yourself to step outside what you think you know. You're willingly confronting your own biases, your own constructed barriers. The atmosphere around them thickened with intensity. Silence settled. Mark seemed to be searching for something within her words, an alignment, a purpose. Yet she could also see doubt woven through his expression. It was almost reflective of her own inner conflict. But isn't it exhausting to constantly dig into fragile territories? He asked, probing deeper. Exhausting? She mused. Maybe, at times. But that exhaustion is worth it. I realized that my fear of vulnerability was shrinking me. Now, I choose to embrace it. If I don't allow myself to be uncomfortable, I'll miss the beauty that lies outside my boundaries. Mark's gaze locked onto hers, registering what she had said. There was an unfolding realization there, as if her words were slowly seeping into the foundations of his carefully constructed views. Perhaps you have a point, he conceded, his tone shifting to one of contemplation rather than dismissal. I've built walls, thinking they protected me. Maybe those walls have also isolated me. Victory surged through Sarah as she felt the subtle shift. Yet, unease crept back. What if this moment of connection slipped through their fingers like grains of sand? She needed to steer the conversation deeper. Has there ever been a moment when you felt completely vulnerable, when the protective walls came crashing down? She dared to ask. The question was bold, more confrontational than anything she had previously put forth. He flinched slightly, and a shadow crossed his features, fleeting yet palpable. It's easier to hide in my world of privilege. Or maybe, she countered, it's simply easier to sit on the sidelines. The challenge lingered between them, the air thickening with uncharted feelings. Mark's eyes flickered with something, fear. Awareness? It was unclear, yet Sarah felt the enormity of it wrap around them like a cloak. She had invoked vulnerability, nudged him towards the edge, but was he willing to take that leap? She wanted to create a space where honesty thrived, where imperfection was embraced. Do you think we all have language barriers, in the literal and metaphorical senses? Are we merely shouting across chasms created by our own fears? She asked, hardly believing her own boldness. Mark remained pensive, mulling over her words while the cafe's muted conversations ebbed and flowed around them. In that moment, Sarah realized she was not just responding to him, she was inviting him into the complexities of her own unsteady existence. And in doing so, she felt bolstered, confident in her capacity to initiate profound change. Yet, there was still that thread of doubt: how far could awareness shift inertia? Would they seize this moment, or would it disperse into nothingness? The unease of that uncertainty filled the space between them, palpable and heavy. Let's take this leap together, he finally whispered, the tremor in his voice betraying his own battle with the unknown. The sound echoed through her, confirming what she had hoped. But now, for the first time, it opened another door. What lay ahead remained cloaked in darkness, as exciting as it was terrifying. She could sense that their journey together was just beginning, and it would inevitably force them both to confront the shadows of their pasts. What steps would they take next, and could they transcend the constructed barriers that loomed like giants between their lives? Would they find meaning in their intertwining narratives, or was this merely a momentarily lit path leading to inevitable divergence? As the cafe hummed with the distant clatter of cups and the soft murmur of conversations, Sarah felt the intensity of Mark's words reverberate within her. Let us take this leap together. The fear that had been gnawing at her heart transformed into a flicker of hope. This could be a moment of transformation for both of them if they could just lean into the vulnerability that hung in the air. What does that mean for us? She asked, her voice steady despite the tempest of emotions brewing inside her. Mark's brow furrowed, his inner conflict plainly visible, the measures he had taken to shield himself felt on the verge of unraveling. It means he started but faltered, searching for the right words. I need to confront what I've hidden from myself even if it terrifies me. His admission was met with warmth, illuminating the path ahead, yet the flicker of fear in his eyes reminded her of her own journey. She drew a breath, steadying herself amidst the uncertainty. She, too, had been terrified to dig into her past, fearful of what might resurface. Confrontation requires strength, she replied, her mind racing through the unspoken connections that tethered them. But it also demands clarity. We can't just jump off into the unknown, we need to define what we're leaping towards. Mark nodded slowly, considering her words. And what is that for you? Her own journey bubbled up, memories of late-night studies, reckless ambition, and that ever-present sensation of inadequacy. For me, it's about bridging gaps. I've always felt an outsider, and each language I learned was a tool to connect. When I speak Spanish, or French, or Mandarin, I'm not just communicating, I'm tearing down walls that I grew up believing were unscalable. There it was again, that spark igniting her purpose. If she hoped to guide Mark toward a new perspective about himself, she needed to share her truth authentically. The paths were intertwined, and both would need to navigate their fears together. She felt that push from within, a call to delve deeper. But what if I tumble down? Mark interjected, breaking her reverie of introspection. What if facing this means I lose everything? My reputation, my lifestyle. His words hung in the air, heavy and loaded with risk. Sarah could sense the enormity of what was at stake for him. Maybe sometimes we must lose a part of ourselves to discover who we truly are, she offered, her voice more resolute. It's a paradox. We hold on to our identities tightly, but it's often those very identities that chain us to fear. Mark shifted in his seat, the weight of her words colliding within him. For a moment, an unspoken challenge hovered between them, and Sarah ventured into the depths of her own fears. The fear of failure, yes, but also the exhilarating thought of success that came through embracing vulnerability. I know it's terrifying, she acknowledged, her voice lowering slightly as she leaned forward, her heart racing. But have you ever felt the exhilaration of vulnerability? Of showing your true self without fear of judgment? He hesitated before shaking his head. I don't know if I'm ready for that. In a flash, realization coursed through her. Sarah had plunged into emotional depths, but she had yet to grasp how far Mark was willing to tread into that murky water. They were like two boats adrift in a vast ocean of uncertainty. Perhaps readiness doesn't exist in clear boundaries, she mused, grappling with the thought. What if we step forward together, not knowing where it will lead us? His gaze softened, awareness dawning that maybe, just maybe, the path to connection required abandoning the need for control. Maybe all they needed was to acknowledge the discomfort. Then let us start small, he proposed. What if we embrace one uncomfortable conversation at a time? Agreed, she replied, emboldened by his willingness. But understand this, discomfort isn't merely a hurdle to jump over, it's also a guide that illuminates the way. In that moment, they both felt that this could be their turning point. A connection that had begun with an exchange of language, transformed into a resolution to uncover self-awareness while navigating the labyrinth of their intertwined existences. Yet as they sat there, a compelling thought struck Sarah. Was she prepared to confront her own shadows as well? The unresolved questions in her past loomed large, ready to surface when least expected. Would she truly be able to embrace the uncertainty she had laid before him? Then came the bolt from the blue as Mark leaned closer, voice fraying at the edges. What are the shadows chasing you? The question unfurled in her mind with sharp clarity, serving as a reminder that the leap both sought was not merely about external perceptions, it was also about grappling with internal monstrosities. What lay beneath the surface of their professional facades? With the shadows closing in on both sides, it dawned on them that the next conversation could shape the contours of their lives, leading them toward revelations they might not yet be ready to face. Would they dare to stare down their fears, or would the shadows keep them from uncovering deeper truths? The cafe began to quiet as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue that slipped through the windows, painting the walls with warm light. Yet, within Sarah, an internal storm brewed, fueled by Mark's probing question. Shadows danced at the edges of her consciousness, old memories resurfacing uninvited. What are the shadows chasing you? His inquiry echoed, a relentless refrain. It wasn't a question she was prepared to answer. It wasn't just about the fear of failure or the inadequacy that stemmed from her past, it was about understanding her own worth, something she had grappled with for years. She began, but caught herself, feeling exposed. This was no time to shy away from honesty. I have this nagging fear that no matter how many languages I learn or how proficient I become, it won't be enough. People still see me as less than. Mark shifted, his eyes narrowing as he processed her admission. Why do you think that is? It's simple, she replied, a hint of defiance creeping in. I come from a small town, where ambition was viewed with skepticism, an outsider always chasing dreams that seemed too big. I sometimes feel as if I'm acting a part. What if I'm just a facade, hiding behind my accomplishments? The cracks in her resolute exterior were deepening. Vulnerability washed over her like a wave, loosening the tight grip she had on her emotions. Here she was, exposing her insecurities, and yet, she felt a strange sense of liberation. Mark leaned forward, his interest piqued. But you've achieved so much. 9 languages, Sarah. That's not something to dismiss. It's incredible. It shows your dedication. She exhaled slowly, appreciative of his support but still wrestling with her self-doubt. But what if I'm only a success in the eyes of others? What if I don't see it in myself? The silence that followed felt heavy. It was as if time had slowed down, and in that stillness, Sarah contemplated the implications of Mark's question. The shadows had names: fear, inadequacy, and a paralyzing need for acceptance. Would confronting them be enough to exorcise their hold on her? Maybe you're looking at it the wrong way, Mark suggested, his tone softer now. What if you learn to embrace those shadows instead? Embrace them? She echoed, the absurdity of it making her scoff. How do you embrace something that haunts you? By acknowledging their existence and refusing to let them define you. He paused, his gaze steady and unwavering. You're not just the failures, you're also your triumphs. Why not let those define who you are? His words sank in, creating ripples of thought. Was it possible that her identity could be reconstructed, not around the remnants of her past but through the lens of her achievements and desires? What if connecting with her true self was the key to dispelling the shadows? A hunch of determination began to rise amidst her uncertainty. You're right. I've spent too long letting my fears dictate my narrative. It was a revelation. Sarah had always been driven by the desire to connect through language, to build bridges where there were none. Learning these languages was not merely a way to communicate, it was a statement. It was claiming her space in a world that often made her feel small. What about you, Mark? She queried, shifting the focus back to him, needing to reciprocate the shared vulnerability. What shadows trail you? For the first time since they had begun this journey together, Mark appeared uncertain. His brows furrowed as if he were weighing the significance of his own secrets. There's this part of me that feels like I've been playing a role for so long, a successful businessman on the outside, but inside I sometimes wonder if I'm just a coward. Her heart raced. The confession bore a striking resemblance to her own internal conflicts. They were not so different after all. Maybe our conversations can help us navigate through those roles, she offered gently, because it seems we've both been masking our true selves. But as Mark's expression changed, another pang of tension crept into the atmosphere, revealing a profound truth that demanded confrontation. Were they truly ready to unveil the unpolished versions of themselves, to stand in unrelenting honesty with one another? Just then, the cafe door chimed as a new customer entered, breaking the moment. His eyes drifted towards Mark, a look of recognition dawning as he approached their table. The last shred of protection slipped away as anticipation mounted within Sarah. "Mark West?" the newcomer inquired, his tone edged with a blend of familiarity and challenge. "Yeah," Mark responded, confusion evident in his eyes. Before Sarah could grasp the implications, she sensed a profound shift in the air. The walls of vulnerability they had begun to build together were about to face an unexpected, perhaps damning, test. What would happen when the shadows of their past collided with the realities of their present? Would they emerge stronger, or would the confrontation leave them shattered? The answers loomed just beyond reach, tantalizing yet terrifying. As Sarah dissected the newcomer's confident demeanor, a creeping sense of dread gripped her. The familiar flutter of anxiety tightened her chest. She recognized the challenge in his posture and the gleam in his eye. Mark's moment of clarity was at risk of being overshadowed, and the prospect of vulnerability now deepened with the presence of this unexpected arrival. "Hi, Frank," Mark finally replied, his voice a mixture of surprise and wariness. The connection between the two men was palpable, yet Sarah could feel the unspoken tension radiating like heat from a furnace. She glanced between them, wrestling with the instinct to retreat. "Long time no see, huh?" Frank smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I didn't know you were hanging out in coffee shops these days." The words felt like a jab. Mark's eyes shifted momentarily before glancing back at Sarah, who wondered if he even realized the gravity of the conversation that was unraveling right beside him. Could he let her in, or would these layers of his past continue to obscure their budding connection? "Just trying to unwind," Mark replied, his voice firm yet strained. "What are you doing here?" There was a clear undercurrent in Frank's tone, a familiar bravado that hinted at past interactions laden with competition and expectation. "I'm expanding my business, looking for new talent, actually. Heard you were in the language business, thought I'd stop by." Mark clenched his jaw, the tension escalating. Sarah sensed the shadows creeping back into his world along with Frank's presence, and a sudden impulse struck her. She felt the urge to assert herself, to step out of the periphery of Mark's life and confront this unexpected challenge not only for him but also for herself. "Oh, you mean the language consultancy?" Sarah interjected, willing her voice to remain steady as she turned toward Frank. "Mark's doing impressive work, and we're in discussions about some collaborations." Surprise danced in Frank's eyes, quickly followed by skepticism. "Is that so? I didn't realize you were on his level. What's your background?" "Sarah," she introduced herself, managing a composed smile despite the simmering doubt within. "I've studied 9 languages and have been working on bridging cultural gaps in business communication." Frank raised an eyebrow. 9 languages? "That sounds ambitious," he replied, sarcasm just beneath the surface. "And how exactly do you plan to make that work in a market that values results over, well, multilingual trivia?" The barbs hit her hard, yet something new bubbled to the surface, a fierce resilience ignited by his assumptions. Did he really view her as just another outsider? More importantly, could she shatter that perception? "I've learned that language is more than just phrases, it's about understanding contexts. Every interaction is a chance to unlock opportunities that others overlook," she asserted, her voice growing steadier. With each word, she felt herself reclaiming the narrative, grounding her worth beyond mere competence. Mark watched with a mix of admiration and surprise. In that moment, Sarah realized this was a chance not just for Mark's defenses but her own to be fortified. Here she was, not hiding behind her language skills or the insecurities born from the judgment of a small town, she was standing firm, a woman in her own right. Frank's mask of condescension faltered as he grasped the determination in Sarah's presence. Interesting perspective, he said, an edge of reluctant respect creeping in, but the challenge still lingered in the air. Thank you, she replied, and I believe it's already creating pathways. That's what drives me. The conviction felt like a shift, something powerful that had been waiting to be unleashed. For the first time, she felt she was stepping into her own worth. As the atmosphere thickened with a mix of admiration and uncertainty, Sarah's eyes locked with Mark's, a silent question hovering between them, ready to spark broader realizations. Would this encounter propel them both toward authentic self-discovery, or would past shadows undermine the newfound strength they were beginning to grasp? With the possibility of embracing their true selves hanging in the balance, Sarah braced for whatever revelation loomed next. It was clear, the fork in the road was approaching, and decisions about how to confront their pasts were now unavoidable. The stakes had risen, and now both of their journeys teetered on the edge of self-realization, eager for the next step toward authenticity or perhaps a plunge back into the darkness they had long navigated. As the tension in the coffee shop hung thick, a momentary silence enveloped them, the palpable energy of Sarah and Mark confronting not just Frank, but their own pasts. Outside, the bustling street continued its relentless flow, oblivious to the internal wars unfolding within the café's walls. Mark's gaze slipped from Sarah to the floor, his thoughts casting a shadow over her newfound clarity. Fear and self-doubt wrestled within him. This confrontation with Frank wasn't just about Sarah proving her worth, it cut deeper into Mark's own insecurities. Would he allow himself to bask in Sarah's strength, or would he retreat into the comfortable shadows of his earlier life, haunted by expectations he had never quite resolved? Mark. Frank's voice sliced through the quiet, the familiar tone intertwined with a malicious curiosity. Seems like you found a little defender here. Let's see if she can keep you out of the deep end. Sarah felt the corner of her mouth twitch as she resisted the urge to retort. She was aware of the role Frank played in Mark's life, a puppet master pulling strings laced with competition and doubt. Yet, a visceral determination surged through her. She could feel the potential to redirect this moment, not just for Mark but also to fortify her own ambition. Mark has every right to explore new avenues, she replied evenly, allowing confidence to lace her words. And so do I. We need to define our own paths, don't you think? Not be confined by others' expectations. Frank's laughter was hollow, yet it conveyed a flicker of unease. Paths aren't built on fantasies, sweetie. It's a tough world out there, language doesn't pay the bills. Beneath the surface of the jab, Sarah could sense the flicker of uncertainty in Frank's demeanor. Was that fear? She seized the opportunity. If she could expose his vulnerability, perhaps Mark could see the strengths they shared more clearly. Actually, she began, language does create pathways to wealth, whether it's through international deals or effective communication. It's often the overlooked details that open doors. It's not just boasting about skills, it's about understanding the market needs and providing real value. Mark's eyes sparkled with interest, igniting a spark she hadn't anticipated. Was he starting to perceive her viewpoint? Would he step forward, no longer tethered to Frank's overshadowing presence? Sarah's right. Mark's voice cut in, steadier than before. In my experience, relationships built on proper communication foster long-term success. Simplistic approaches stifle growth. Frank's brow furrowed. The sudden shift in Mark's tone caught him off guard, reducing the facade he often wore. Are you sure you're not just trying to impress your new friend here? He countered, though the challenge lacked its earlier bite. Impressing Sarah is the least of my concerns, Mark responded, grounded yet unyielding. What matters is defining my future without interference. And I'm not alone in this. Frank's bravado cracked, exposing insecurity beneath. It wasn't simply a confrontation, it was a reflection of how far Mark had come. He was no longer the passive character in Frank's narrative. Sarah felt a surge of exhilaration, the tension morphing into empowerment. It was a moment of revelation, affirming their budding partnership not just against Frank but in carving a future filled with potential, a future where her worth wasn't merely measured by language skills but by her ability to spark transformation. As they locked eyes, a silent pact formed between them. They were embarking on a journey, fortified by each other's strengths, ready to confront upcoming challenges. But Frank wasn't finished, the antagonistic challenge still lingered in the air, creating a thick atmosphere of unresolved tension. Would they step beyond the bounds of mere professionals and embrace a deeper connection based on shared values? A question pulsated in Sarah's mind, as did an undeniable attraction toward Mark. While the world around them spun on, she felt the danger lurking ahead, whispering of risks needing to be faced. Would they have the courage to tackle their fears together, or would old habits drag them back into the shadows? With the stakes raised and decisions looming on the horizon, both Sarah and Mark stood at a precipice, ready to take the plunge or perhaps remain shackled to the past. What awaited them could shift the very foundations of their intertwined fates. The diner was quieter now, its chaotic energy replaced by a hushed anticipation as the evening wore on. Sarah stood impeccably composed, yet her heart raced with the weight of the recent encounter. Mark had visibly transformed. He wasn't the same man who had underestimated her worth or dismissed her dreams. There was a lightness to his demeanor now, a grounding realization that spilled over into their shared space. Mark pushed back from the table, tension leaving his shoulders. "You were incredible, Sarah. I never knew you had that fight in you." His expression was genuinely impressed, admiration shimmered in his eyes. "Thank you, Mark," she replied, her pulse throbbing with elation. This moment carried the culmination of months of self-doubts and fears, but beyond that, it resonated with growth. Sarah felt lighter, as if the burdens she carried were finally lifting. "I'm not just a waitress anymore, am I?" Mark's nod held significance. "Not even close. You've changed the dynamics for us both." He hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. "You opened my eyes, not just to the value of language, but to the significance of stepping outside the confines that others impose on us." Such a realization felt monumental. Each conversation they had shared had propelled them beyond their previous limitations, they were carving out personal paths rich with potential. With newfound solidarity between them, Sarah felt a pursuit awaken within her. "I think we should collaborate. With our combined skills, we can create something impactful, perhaps workshops on intercultural communication." The very idea ignited something within her, a vision beyond walls, one that painted her as an educator forging connections. Mark's eyes widened with intrigue, recognition dawning. "You're right, there's real potential in that. We could target diverse businesses looking to expand globally. Not just language instruction but understanding the cultural nuances. And addressing that necessity can revolutionize corporate ethics," she added, heart racing. This conversation not only did it hold promise for professional advancement, it felt deeply personal. Sarah was knitting her aspirations into reality. As they discussed ideas, a sense of partnership blossomed. Their discussions traversed precarious waters, yet with each shared insight, they both stepped further into uncharted territory. Sarah realized how much had shifted within her since that Friday night at the diner. Confidence swelled within her. She wasn't just learning languages anymore for the sake of escape, she was utilizing them as tools for empowerment. Yet, Frank's interruptions loomed in the back of her mind. Had he truly understood their importance? What if he managed to sway Mark back toward doubt? "I'm ready to take this leap, Sarah," Mark declared, breaking through her oscillating thoughts with certainty. "Let us schedule some meetings with businesses. Show them the value of integrating language into their goals." "Absolutely. And we can leverage social media to spread the word," reckoning her assertiveness transformed the way she saw herself. We need to be deliberate about how we position this to the public. Each post could illustrate how language opens doors. As they planned their next steps, Sarah could feel a deep-seated joy bloom within her. It wasn't merely about the business opportunities unfolding, it was also about breaking free of previously defined roles. She envisioned herself not only as a bridge builder but as a force for change in a broader narrative, perhaps even the influence that would elevate others, just as she was now elevated. The momentum surged within, firmly establishing new ground. This rebirth of ambition unshackled her from the notions of being less than. She was more than a waitress, she was becoming an architect of her life, a mother who would teach her daughter about the vast potential beyond what others dictated. "Sarah," Mark interrupted her reverie, voice even and steady. "I want to thank you. This journey, even in its early days, has changed so much for me. I no longer fear the shadows, I want to confront them instead." His sincerity impressed upon her anew that their connection wasn't solely professional. The acknowledgement of their intertwined paths felt like a celebratory moment. Sarah's heart swelled, feeling pride outside the energies of self-doubt. They were no longer caged, each had emerged stronger, willing to confront the judgments and shadows that had previously loomed large. "Together we can redefine success," she agreed, encouragingly. "Let us create something that resonates deeply, beyond just language but into the human experience." In her surge of ambition coupled with Mark's newfound confidence, Sarah recognized a shared commitment that could push against the very limits of their realities. She had conquered a lifetime of fear, Mark, too, was transforming. The shadows no longer held dominion, they were merely catalysts in their journey. Fully aware of the endeavor ahead, Sarah could only anticipate the exhilaration of what was to come. As she stood, significant changes settled within her psyche. She sensed that she was just beginning to understand the power of not just dreaming, but of actualizing dreams. The leap they had both taken to step into their truest selves promised to be layered with challenges, discovery, and ultimately, stunning collaboration. This was a new chapter, not merely connecting them to each other, but to the world at large. With resolve pulsing through her, Sarah smiled as she reflected on the journey ahead. Mark too had become more than just a fellow employee, he was an ally, and together, they could navigate the opportunities and the uncharted territories that lay before them. With a satisfied nod, they clinked mugs of coffee, a toast to their ambitions on the horizon. Sarah felt buoyant, thoroughly engaged in the ambitions of the moment. Each sip was grounded in purpose, solidified by the understanding that new horizons awaited them both. She was ready to tackle the shadows together, to invite them to witness their transformation without fear, without hesitation. The world was vast, vibrant, and filled with possibility, and Sarah was no longer merely an observer. She had arrived. Don't forget, this is the moment to take action. You need to subscribe now for more exclusive personal transformation stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support our journey together. Comment your thoughts, reactions, and theories about Sarah and Mark's amazing journey. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second, let us inspire others to transform.